Hello and welcome to week 2 of online learning. We're going to talk about our exponential functions, which we've actually seen before. Today we're going to focus on graphing, which means on your assignment you're really going to need to make sure you print off the assignment or use a ruler or a straight edge to make your graphs look really pretty on your own paper. Alright, so remember a parent function is the original equation of that specific graph. For an exponential, that's going to be different all the time. There's not just one right answer. So we could have a function where it's 4 to the x power. This is an exponential. And this is the parent function of this if we try to add a number onto it or multiply it by a number as well. That original y equals 4 to the x power, that's the parent function. Instead of it being a base of 4, we could make it 5. In which case, the parent function is just 5 to the power of x. So that's what that all means. Now, when we add a number onto the end, like we've added 10 here, that's going to help move the graph up and down from the original. And since we multiplied by a number, that's going to mess with the original parent function as well. Alright, so we are going to move on to an example 1, and we are going to graph this exponential equation. Y equals 2 to the x power. Now this is a parent function. We could add a number onto it, multiply it by something, and then we'd be changing it. So, to figure this out, I'm going to make a t-chart. Now, on the parent function, we're always going to start with 0, go up a couple numbers, and then down a couple numbers. So, we're going to substitute these x values into the equation and see what we get. So, if I substitute 0, 2 to the 0 power, anything to the 0 power is always 1. So we get that number right there. 2 to the first power is 2, nice and easy, and 2 squared is 4. So we've got those numbers pretty quick. Now, with our negative exponent, that's probably been a while, but a lot of people try to say that equals a negative 2, which they would be incorrect. That is not correct. What the negative exponent means is I take that 2 and put it in the other part of the fraction. So right now, that 2 is in the numerator. I need to move it down to the denominator, and now that exponent is positive. And since there was nothing else with the 2, a 1 stays in the numerator. So that's actually going to be a half. Now, same thing with the negative 2 exponent. This means we're going to put that down in the denominator, and that exponent is now positive, and we simplify. So this is actually 1/4, or 0.25. Either one works. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do is to graph all these points on your paper or on graph paper and see how it looks, because what I'm going to draw here is going to look not as pretty. So, here's our 2 axes. All right, so I'm first going to graph the 0, 1, which is actually going to be right here. 1, 2, 2, 4, and I'm going to graph the negative x values. Now, if we were to graph when x is -3 and -4 and so on, this graph would continue to look like this. It would just keep going and getting closer and closer to the x-axis. It's going to go on and on like that. Now, the question is, will the y value ever be 0? Or will it ever be negative in this case? And the answer is no. Can you think of a number that can be substituted into this x value? That when you take 2 to that number, to the power of that number, the answer will be 0? That's because it's not going to work. You can't figure out a number. So this graph is never ever going to cross the x-axis. It's going to get really, really close to it. In fact, if you type this in your graphing calculator and you look at the t-chart, at all your values in the graph on the chart, it might actually say 0, but the reality is that it doesn't. The answer really is 0.000000001. It's never actually going to be 0. And that's what an asymptote is. So, on this graph, they're also going to ask you to write the asymptote. Now, the asymptote is a line where your graph is never going to meet. In this case, the asymptote is going to be the x-axis here. So we need to write the equation for that. Since it's horizontal, that's going to be y equals a number. And the value of y on that red line there is 0. So that's the asymptote there. Now, if we were to add a number onto the end of our graph, this graph is going to move up or down, in which case that asymptote will also be moved. So make sure you watch that and see what happens for every single question.